I know. I know. I know I'm a guy that's doing a podcast that mostly talks about relationships from a guy's perspective, and I know that that's always been the case, but this episode is about the ladies. And they'll be taking center stage in a lot of this talk, and I'm gonna be talking about them quite a bit, kind of like the same way a lot of guys do, which is why this is still a very guy-centric podcast that's still going to be said from a guy's perspective, even though I'm gonna spew a bunch of shit that I don't entirely know. But at least I have given you that warning in advance and I can get on to things, so I will start things off from a more international story that should be found to be particularly interesting. Now, there is a man in the US of A who has filed a $2.3 million lawsuit against Beyoncé, with one of the claims being, and just get this for a second, she is the reason that he is gay. Just think through that for a little bit. Apparently, there's a dude that believes Beyoncé is the reason that he's gay. And I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I'm not really feeling this. I actually think it's a pack of bull. And I'm gonna explain why.
Get ready for the battle of the sexes.
Okay, so I'm just gonna come out here and admit I'm not the biggest fan of Beyoncé. I am not a big fan of the music that she's been doing lately. I do not like what the Beehive has done to her and her image and her reputation and ego and shit. I feel like a lot of that shit's excessive. I'm not a fan of that. I have discussed a number of other things that I don't really like with all that much on different episodes many years back. But in this particular case, much as I'm not really one to be on her side for shit, I have to admit I'm actually taking her side of this entire thing. And to be quite honest, the reason is actually pretty simple. But let me just read the very short caption that came with this entire thing. So it says, and I quote, "A Texas man has filed a lawsuit against Beyoncé for $2.3 million. Within the 47-page lawsuit, he accuses her of many things, including credit theft, identity theft, defamation of character, and even causing him to be gay. He did not explain exactly how Beyoncé caused him to be gay." End quote. And if someone was telling me that, they're going to go and sue people for making them gay, I think on the list of people, the last person I'd put there is Beyoncé. If you switched Beyoncé for Cardi B and you put Cardi B's name there, I can understand. If he decided to go for some of the other people like Sam Smith, Lil Nas X, hell, maybe even Lizzo, I'd probably understand the whole, because of you, I'm gay now. But Beyoncé? I don't know. I don't think in any one of the many lyrics she's had over the many years she's been in the industry, even including recent ones, that she's ever come out and even said the word dick. I've never heard a Beyoncé song where she's used the word dick. And I don't think she's done sexual content ever since, Drunk in Love from back in maybe 2013, but mostly 2014. So for the past 7, maybe 9, possibly 10 years, she hasn't done sexual content. So how exactly could this guy claim that Beyoncé is the reason why he's gay? Not unless if he started being gay way back in the day when she was busy singing Baby Boy and Naughty Girl and shit like that. At that point, maybe you can claim that that's actually the case. But right now, I feel like Cardi B is a much bigger menace than Beyoncé is in the name of possibly getting guys to go gay. Because if you listen to the content in her music and you say it as a guy and it has zero context of this is a Cardi B song, that shit sounds very, very sus. Very sus. And I kid you not, I can pull up WAP and just look at a verse and sort of read it, and you will actually get my point particularly well. Because this is the very first verse that Cardi B does on the song WAP, and it says, and I quote, "Beat it up, nigga, catch a charge, extra large and extra hard. Put this pussy right in your face, swipe your nose like a credit card. Hop on top, I wanna ride, I do a kegel while it's inside. Spit in my mouth, look in my eyes, this pussy is wet, come take a dive. Tie me up like I'm surprised, let's role play, I'll wear disguise. I want you to park that Big Mac truck right in this little garage. Make it cream, make me scream, out in public, make a scene. I don't cook, I don't clean, but let me tell you how I got this ring." And you're telling me that Beyonce and her lyrics have a much larger capability of making a nigga gay than this shit from Cardi B? Come on, bruh. I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I tend to think that Cardi B's shit can probably make more niggas gay than Beyonce's shit would. Although, then again, I don't know what makes a nigga gay, so I don't want to take this any further and start sounding sus. So, without making this episode any more sus than it already sounds, let me just start by saying, welcome to Breakdown on West Side, your number one breakdown podcast, coming to you from Nairobi, Kenya. The man on the mic is a man who knows that he is straight, probably because he wasn't a fan of Beyonce. He's a man who likes his women the same exact way he likes his yogurt. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This show probably should have been done when I'm on like weed cookies or I'm like high or like smoking a blunt or some shit, because it is episode 420. And to be quite honest, this is one of the more interesting episodes that I've done, not just because of the episode number or the fact that I'm defending Beyonce, but because I'll be discussing quite a bit that is coming from a woman's perspective, but I'm supposed to talk about it and maybe even defend it from a guy's perspective. And considering that I've spent so much time busy sort of defending Beyonce in this particular case, which I never really thought I'd ever be doing, I need to get the show on the road. Although, before I get into the main topic of this episode, I want to talk about something for a little bit that was put to my attention a couple of days ago, and I felt like it's just one of those things that needs to be discussed. And it was the concept of the understanding girlfriend or the understanding wife. And mad shout out to Vanessa who brought this trend to my attention, because I feel like this is a very, very wild trend. Now, for those of y'all that don't know about it or haven't heard about it, it's a trend that's been going around on TikTok where people go and post up a video of a woman who isn't dressed all that great or is wearing a nice dress and really bad shoes. Although for the most part, I was seeing a lot of videos where women were having shitty weaves. And it's the whole talk of, oh, you're such an understanding girlfriend that you are okay with your man not buying you gifts, not paying for the salon, not buying you expensive weaves and shit. So you're wearing the low quality weave, you're wearing the shitty shoes, you're wearing the long ass, not so good looking dress because your husband, your partner, your boyfriend isn't putting the money down for you to get it. And some women will even take it a step further and talk about how, you know, the undeserving girlfriend is the one that's getting all that shitty treatment, while his other side chicks are having the cash blown on them and the guy is busy spending money and buying the gifts and everything for them. And when I was seeing this entire thing, like, personally, I usually don't give too much of a shit about stuff like this because, you know, it's the babes and they're gonna talk about it one way or another. But when I think about this and a lot of the other advice that women are busy being told about guys on TikTok more so, but essentially on the internet, you know, babes that are like, oh, you know, if he won't buy you a Birkin, or if he won't spend such and such money on you, or if he doesn't pay for this, if he doesn't pay for that, then drop him, sis. Like, at times I sit back and I'm like, does it occur to some of these women that this is like a regression from the whole approach that they had back in like the 60s, going back with feminism and shit? Because women fought so hard to get out of the home and out of the kitchen more so that they can get into the workforce, make their own money, get paid the same as men. And then all of a sudden, now they've come back and they're like, we want the men who are probably being paid roughly about the same as us, if not a little bit more, a little bit less, to pretty much be spending their money on us, almost as if we weren't working and making our own money. Like, that shit's just a little bit wild to me. And I get it. It's not a basic need. It's the gifting. It's the acts of service and shit. And he should be able to be doing that as a guy. And, you know, while that's probably true, I just have one issue with this. The way a lot of these women are talking about it, the way a lot of these women are practically almost demanding for it, it's almost like it's a right that because you're the girlfriend, you have to get some of these things. You have to be treated that way, which in my personal opinion is absolute bull. Not because I think you shouldn't get that treatment, but because I think it should be given as a privilege and not as a right. The problem is that there's so many babes out here nowadays that are busy being told that a man has to do this for you, a man has to do, and it's almost like it's a right for a man, or at least it's a right for the woman to receive some of these things as opposed to it being a privilege. And personally speaking, I feel like that will mislead a lot of young women. Hell, even, women that are of age, I think a lot of them are being misled by this advice. But more so than that, it puts a lot of pressure on guys, because the more such content is being pushed out there, the more guys are believing that not unless if you have money, you shouldn't get into a relationship. Not unless if you're willing to spend money on a babe, you shouldn't be trying to get into a relationship, which in and of itself is messing people's confidence. So whatever potential relationship could have happened probably won't happen, because the guy doesn't think he has the money, or he doesn't think that he can spend that kind of money, or he doesn't think that he can afford a babe, even though the babe hasn't said anything of that sort. And there's a lot of people that now are very relationship averse and are choosing to go for other alternatives that are very low quality and require very little effort, which ends up leaving both sides deprived of actual good emotional connection and like good relationship benefits and shit. Although then again, maybe that's just me, and maybe I'm the one that's looking for an understanding girlfriend, but I'll leave that to you. And I'm gonna move it on to our main topic of the episode. Now, for those of you all that spent quite a bit of time on the internet last week, you may have heard of Mia Khalifa and her marriage advice, or you might have seen Mia Khalifa trending on some of the social media platforms for some supposed advice that she gave. Now, I will admit, I am not the first person that is talking about this. Hell, I'm probably not the earliest who's spoken about it, because this information is like a week old, and people have been talking about this for the past week. It's just that I feel like there's something that's a little bit off about it. But before I can kind of get into the full thing and my thoughts on it, let me just play the clip right here, then we can get into it. So here it is.
Oh, we're comparing stats. Baby girl doesn't know that I am Tom Brady at this game. Married at 18, divorced at 21. Second marriage, married at 25, divorced at 28. Third engagement, engaged at 29, ended it at 30, but I kept the ring. I'm still keeping Tom Brady on his toes. We should not be afraid to leave these men. We are not stuck with these people. Marriage is not a sanctimonious thing. It is paperwork. It's something, it's a commitment you make to someone. But if you feel like you're not getting anything from that commitment and you're trying, you gotta go. You have to go. I know it's difficult to fill out paperwork and to make appointments and to do all of these things, but this is your fucking life. Do you want to be stuck with someone? Period. Do you want to be stuck with someone?
Okay, it's actually just sort of clicked in my mind that I forgot to tell people who don't know who or what Mia Khalifa is, who she is. And to give a pretty brief description for those of y'all that don't know who or what Mia Khalifa is a porn star, or was a porn star. But considering that she's been on OnlyFans, one of the highest paid creators there, you could technically still claim that she's a porn star to a certain degree. But either way, she at some point was actually the highest ranked porn star in the world on Pornhub, and millions of men every single day would practically beat their meats to the sight of her getting railed by a dude or a couple of dudes. But now that I've said that, I can actually get to the comments and what a lot of people were saying, and then I can get to what it is that I think about everything that she said. Because I actually noticed that a lot of people, the moment that she put this out on TikTok and then it ended up on Twitter and it really blew up on Twitter, is a lot of people were actually losing their shit on her, and they were like, how is it that, this babe who was used to getting railed by dudes is now trying to advise women to leave dudes, and yet her ability to retain a dude is very, very much in jeopardy just by the fact that she was a porn star. Other people were busy talking about how she can't give any good advice worth a shit. She's advising younger girls to not stay in marriages, and that's bad advice coming from her. And with her history, it's understandable why she was being left, blah, blah. And, people were going on and on and on about her and her life as a porn star. And the fact that she has pretty much admitted to have been in 2 failed marriages and 1 failed engagement, and now she's advising other women to leave, which is particularly bad advice. And I think a lot of people stuck onto that and they went on and on and on and on. But during the entire time, when I was kind of looking at it, I actually sort of noticed something out of all this. And it was the fact that most people were not particularly criticizing the advice itself, but rather the person giving the advice. Like, people were so fixated on the fact that it's Mia Khalifa who said it, and Mia Khalifa's history as a porn star more so, and, maybe the included bit of, the 2 failed marriages and shit, and they were using that to criticize whatever advice she's giving. And in my personal opinion, while I can understand that, I don't think that's usually the best course of action. Granted, I have made that mistake multiple times, and a lot of people will make that mistake where you start by judging the person giving the information, and you do it so harshly that you actually forget to critique the information itself to see if what they're saying could possibly be true or false. And a shit ton of people do that, but that doesn't particularly make it right. Now, for me, I picked up 2 main things out of this supposed advice that she gave, which I am going to discuss. The first one being, if you're unhappy, then you should leave. And the second one being, marriage isn't sanctimonious, it's just a bunch of paperwork, blah, blah, blah. And I will get to those, but granted, not to absolve her of anything, and not to say that whatever she's saying should be considered good advice, but if you kind of think about it, a lot of people do take advice from porn stars on sex. Doesn't mean that they're great at sex, it just means that they're great performers, or they're known for having particularly big dick or some shit of the sort, or they're just known for fucking multiple babes on camera, which is usually just the case. And when you look at the whole case of the failed marriages, I'm probably poking the bear by saying this, but Kevin Samuels also was in marriages that didn't really work out before he started giving advice on the internet for guys and also women to follow. So using the whole failed marriages thing as a thing to bring down someone's opinion isn't the best point to take on, especially for a lot of people that were looking up to Kevin Samuels. But then again, that's just me. Let me now try and get to the so-called marriage advice that Mia Khalifa gave. And before I do that, I just want to give a quick disclaimer, which I probably should have done before I went too deep into discussing all of this and like bringing out the whole, failed marriage this and said what. And I will just give it here and say that considering that I'm a young single man who is not married, has never been married before, I cannot say that whatever it is that I'm giving is completely definitive advice. And at best, I am speaking speculatively. So please do not consider this as actual marriage advice, but just utilize it as an entertaining way to look at some of the opinions that can be given on the entire topic. User discretion advised. Now, with all of that said, let's look at the 2 main things that I picked up from this entire thing that people were making a lot of brouhaha about. And the first one was, if you're unhappy, then you should just leave the relationship, the marriage that you're in. Now, is that particularly good advice or bad? To be very honest, I don't think that's particularly good advice. Not unless if you're talking about like maybe a friends with benefits or a situationship at best. But for the most part, if you're in a relationship, and I believe also in a marriage, I don't think leaving simply because you're unhappy is a justifiable reason for you to separate or to divorce or to leave your particular partner. And let me just sort of try and explain why. One, because a lot of guys are actually very unhappy in their relationships, but they stick around. And I know that probably shouldn't be used as a good gauge for what a good relationship is or what good relationship practices are. But to kind of give a much better answer to all of this, I think if you're unhappy in a relationship, then you should probably talk it out. Or at least you should let your partner know so that you guys can find a way around it. Because a lot of times you tend to find that people who claim that they're unhappy in a relationship sometimes just need a reset. Sometimes they need to get away because probably they've been losing out on intimacy and they haven't felt like they're particularly cared for. Or it could be a case of lacking in conjugal rights, so maybe they need to go and get some therapy for it, or maybe you need to start addressing her needs or some shit, or his needs, depending on who it is that you're fucking and who you are. Like, at the end of the day, there's ways to get around the whole unhappiness thing when you're in a relationship, more so a long-term one, because at the end of the day, it's not like you're always going to be happy. And I don't think when you're married, you're always going to be happy, especially when you've made such a lifelong commitment. There's times when you're going to be happy and there's times when you're going to be unhappy. Should you leave just because you're not happy at the situation, but you have kids? No. Like, you think about a marriage, you have to think about the concept of having kids as well. If that was happening and people were changing marriage partners, do you know the number of step siblings we'd all have? Like, that shit is actually wild. So, happiness, which is a very fleeting feeling because it comes and goes and it's not always there, I think is probably one of the most lackluster reasons to leave someone in a relationship or a marriage. I'd probably say if you pair that up with lack of communication or lack of cooperation in actually making the relationship work, can actually work as a good enough reason. But simply being unhappy? No. You can just think of the unhappiness as like the icing or like the whipped cream to a cake. So if you don't have the cake, the icing, the whipped cream, it really doesn't have much substance to it. So you have to get the cake, you have to go and mix all of that in there before you can actually turn it into something worthwhile. But with that said, now the second part that she sort of brought in, or at least the second point that she made clear, was that marriage isn't sanctimonious, it's not all that, it's mainly just paperwork. And yes, it's a lot of work and a lot of paperwork, and like you involve other people when you're ending the process and even, creating the process, but it's mostly just paperwork. And to be very honest, to be completely honest about it, she's not entirely wrong. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that marriages are just paperwork, but to some people they are. To some people, the marriage was a transactional act. The marriage was how they got their inheritance. The marriage was a stage in life that they had to pass, almost like you doing Monopoly and having to go through the go part so that you can get your payout and, move on. Like, for a lot of people, marriage is like passing go, and as such, it is almost transactional, if not just a life goal that they look at passing without really contemplating on its actual value in their lives. So to a number of people, that's actually particularly true. Now, should it just be transactional? Should it just be paperwork? Should it just remain as this unsanctimonious thing? Not necessarily. I think people give a shit ton of value to marriage. Personally, I do. I believe that there's still quite a lot of value in marriage right now, even with a lot of the shit that you see online and that you hear on the radio and everything. But I don't think that's how everyone is going to look at it. Some people just look at it as a life goal that they're passing. But for a lot of us, I do believe that marriage has a lot of value. I do believe that marriage is something that, is a pretty good building foundation for having children and nurturing children, because you have a stable structure which is mostly supposed to be rooted in a certain sense of protection that can allow the nurturing of people as well as children towards getting to their much better selves over time. Like, I personally believe that that's what marriage is, if not it can be. And it's unfortunate that there are a lot of people that look at marriage in a very transactional manner, and she seems to be one of them. And there's a lot of people that treat marriage like it's just paperwork, and in that particular case, then yeah, for them divorce is easy. For them separation is just a matter of, I'm not really feeling this, so I'll just get out. But to kind of conclude all of this, let me just say that at the end of it, I think most people were actually judging her not for what she said, but for who she is or was. Because at the end of the day, most people were just saying, this is what modern women are telling other modern women about marriage, or this is what modern women believe about marriage, which isn't entirely the case. I don't think most women treat it like that, but I believe that most people were looking at it as this is an ex-porn star, a whore, who is giving bad advice to other women, which is going to mess up marriages, which could be the case. But if you critiqued the information that she was giving, you'd realize that, yes, she isn't giving some of the best advice, at least in my purview, but I don't think that she was completely off in a lot of the stuff that she was saying, because there's a lot of people that say something similar to this. There's a lot of women online who will say stuff like this, and some people will agree, others will disagree. Maybe if more people would disconnect the fact that this is a porn star who's saying this, or this is Mia Khalifa, or this is an online whore who's saying this, and this is marriage advice, so it's definitely bad from the jump, then maybe we'd at least critique the advice to at least sharpen up the parts which seem pretty blunt, and call out some of the information that we find should be critically looked at and probably isn't entirely true. But then again, considering that I am a young man that is saying this and I am not married, then maybe I'm just speaking a pack of bullshit. But I want your thoughts on it. On IG, on Facebook, it is at Breaktime on Westside. On Twitter, it is at Bagak the D. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.